Morning, everybody. It's Pastor Doug Circle at Mission of Grace in Hayden, and we're here getting our message out to you today. I hope everything's okay in your world. We had a little baby granddaughter last Saturday, and so she's a little bit over a week old today, so things are doing pretty good in our world. I was involved in a wedding yesterday that was just awesome. I have some other friends whose sons and daughters were getting married yesterday, and I hope and believe they had a great time as well. Haven't been able to talk to them yet, but I know they probably did. It was such a beautiful day here in the mountains, and I hope wherever you're at, it was also a beautiful day, and I hope today turns out to be a great day for you. Today, we're going to read from Psalms 40. So if you want to get your phone or your Bible and read along, that would be wonderful. The great thing about the times we're living in is, my daughter had a baby up in New York City, and we're down here in Colorado, and because of FaceTime and Facebooking and all that kind of stuff, it's not the same as being there. But 100 years ago, back when I was a kid, you'd have to make a long distance phone call just to hear the baby cackle, and you might not get to see her for quite some time. But now it makes it so much easier. And so that's the same thing true with our Bibles. If you don't have one, all you got to do is get on your phone and look it up. You can look up whatever version you want or whatever. I'm going to be reading out of the NIV today. So anyway, it's great that we've got this stuff so readily available to us. All right, I'm going to start with verse 1. I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to God. Many will see and fear the Lord and put their trust in him. Well, there's so many awesome little tidbits about this passage, and we're just going to walk through them today. I hope they encourage you. First of all, there's that word waited again. And waited always seems next to the word patient. And those are two tough attributes to apply to our lives. Waiting is never fun. I remember being a kiddo and going to Six Flags down in Arlington, Texas. And I just love Six Flags. I mean, I'm kind of hoping when I die, heaven's sort of a big Six Flags-like experience. Of course, it'll be far greater than that. But it's so much fun to go to Six Flags and run around with your friends. And of course, there was always a lot of girls involved in that whole scene. And it was just a lot of fun. But if you wanted to get on the good ride, you had to wait. And waiting took a while. I still remember thinking I would never get to a certain roller coaster. The waits were so long. And waiting's a part of everyday adult life as well. Like I said, my daughter just had a baby. That meant she had to wait 9 months in order for the little baby to arrive. And it was worth every minute of it. But it's not easy just waiting. Same thing with Christmas. Remember being a kid at Christmas. You have kids, you have grandkids. Boy, the anticipation of that big day or a birthday or whatever is fun, but it's tough too. But being a Christian, there's a lot of waiting involved. Wait on the Lord. I say it again, wait upon the Lord. And so a lot of times what we're going through when we're watching our family members struggle, or perhaps we're going through our own struggles, or we're seeing our nation as a whole struggle right now, a lot of what we can do is wait. I know a lot of people want to try to do more. They think they can do more. And perhaps we can, but it's still slow. Changes are slow. Things are slow. Waiting for things to calm down or to get resolved or to get increased. You have to wait. There's so much waiting involved in Christianity, and it's usually locked right next to the word patience. How many times have you heard people say, boy, that's the one virtue I need more of. I need more patience. I need to learn to wait, to be patient. We have to be patient with ourselves, certainly. We want to improve in something. We want to get better at something. We want to treat people better. And yet we have these certain attributes that at times work against us. Well, it doesn't just get resolved overnight. You have to wait, but you have to be patient in waiting. Patient on God. God's doing something. We would love for our problems to get resolved instantly. We would love to see a move made spiritually instantly. But the truth of the matter is, we have to be patient. We have to wait patiently on God. And in this particular note, notice how the writer said, I waited patiently. I waited patiently for what? For the Lord. That's the key. We're waiting patiently, not for just for no reason. What are we waiting on? We're waiting for God to make a move. We're waiting for God to answer our prayer. We're waiting for God to give us direction. We're waiting for the Lord to resolve things and to help us. But it requires waiting. We're waiting patiently. And the writer said, I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. Have you ever been waiting and you're almost desperate about it, like a child waiting for its mother? It's going to start crying after a while. It's trying to get attention, and it's going to cry because it's got a need that needs to be met. And the mother turns and she realizes, oh, it's time to address this issue. Well, a lot of times we just have to wait patiently on the Lord, and He's finally going to turn. Of course, He's in the process, but we realize we're getting His attention, not that He needs us to. It's not like God can't resolve or fix things instantly, but there's reason that a child has to learn to communicate first by crying, getting attention, and eventually by talking, and then eventually by able to think, I can do this on my own. There's a process involved even in communicating with God. And so we're crying out to the Lord. And it says that I waited on the Lord and He turned to me. He gave you His attention. It says in the book of James, when the Lord is near, when He draws near to you, draw near to Him. And a lot of us are waiting just to know that God is drawing near to us. His timing is perfect. He's setting up the resolution the way that's good for us, but the way that glorifies Him. And sometimes the waiting can seem endless, and the patience requires great strength. Remember, Jesus came to do a lot of stuff, but one thing He did was He came as He suffered. He suffered. He suffered on His dependence and His waiting on God. And we're going to have to sometimes just do the same thing. It requires a type of suffering in that we're waiting. And then He turns to us. He's drawing near to us. It said that the writer said, He turned to me. He heard my cry. How many times when you've prayed is it almost like you're pleading with God? I'm begging Him almost. You're like, oh God, please help my son. God, please, please be with my loved one. God, please. There's nothing wrong with that, but God's hearing our cry. He's not impressed by how loud we're crying. He's not going to be stirred because we're doing something special. He knows what's going on, but like a mother teaching a child, He's teaching us, hey, I'm going to come through, but you can't just have everything this second. But He hears our cry. There's nothing like knowing you've waited on God. You're reaching out to God. You're crying to God. But you have to be confident, just like this writer, He's going to hear your cry. So I cried out to God. I'm waiting for you, Lord. I've been waiting for you to resolve this issue with my child for years. They're now an adult. And you think, I'm never going to live to see resolution. And you may not. Abraham didn't live to see everything God promised him. Nevertheless, he waited, and God heard his cry. God turned to him. You're important enough to God. I guarantee it. He created you. He loves you. This is just the infancy stages of your walk in creation. Doesn't matter if you're 5. It doesn't matter if you're 85. God's still bringing you along because there's more to the spiritual reality we live in than just the temporary here and now. That's why you can do without a lot of things. Cars, boats, skiing, and whatever. Oh, this is my only chance to go see Europe or whatever. Listen, God's got bigger plans for you than just what's going on this beautiful planet. Just going on with the experience of living and breathing now. You're just a sojourner in this world. You're just going through it. This isn't your home. There's a greater home waiting. And right now, God's teaching and preparing you for better things. And so you have to wait on the God, but He's got your attention. He sees it. He's turning to it. Okay? So now in verse 2, he said, He lifted me. He lifted me. After He heard my cry, He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud, and out of the mire. Have you ever been there? Doesn't really matter if you're wealthy or poor, healthy or sick. Have you ever been in that place where you're whatever you're in it thick? It is not good. If you've ever been in a muddy pit and you're trying to climb out of it, the reason it's so slimy and muddy is it's not the reason why, but the part of the problem of trying to escape it is you just keep going down. You can try and dig and move your legs faster, and it's like trying to get your Jeep out of a snowbank or just mud. You're out four-wheeling or something, and you just get deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's the same things with our lives sometimes. There's a situation involved, and we're so eager to try to get it fixed that we just stir and make it worse. It says that God heard me and He lifted me out of that slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. A lot of times, guys, we can make our own problems worse than they really are by not waiting on God but being too impatient and trying to fix things ourselves. Well, I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm a business owner. I can make this work. I can fix this. A lot of it is we're just controlling, not just control freaks, but we're just trying to control things for our betterment to the point to where we're just grinding and getting it worse and worse and worse. And after a while, we've created the mud and mire. At first, it was just a slimy pit. And then with all our activity of going, I'm righteous enough to fix this, I'm good enough to change things, we just make things worse. And I think that might even be true socially. We can just grind it right down to where we've ruined whatever we're trying to do, either pro, con, trying to fix things, trying to settle things. We can overdo it. And I think the good thing is to be patient and wait. I know that a lot of with all the attention out there right now, the response for a lot of the police officers and whatever is they're just starting to walk away. It's because they don't feel like anybody's supporting or helping them. But the truth is they might be making things more challenging for their own future because they're trying to get to something that works for everybody, and it seems like, well, it's not going to. We just need to, calm down and let things settle without just making things worse. Anyway, I think we've all been there, especially individually. A lot of times we try to do things for other people. A lot of people want to, you know what, I'm going to help that person. They're in trouble, and I'm a Christian, and I'm going to help them. Somehow I'm going to help them. But we end up over helping them. We end up perhaps even being, by your acts of benevolence, you can be taken advantage of because these people are in such a dilemma. They're like the guy who's reaching up to be pulled out of the swamp, and you're going to help them. You're going to reach down, and you reach down and they pull you in. Things get worse. I watched a thing the other day on YouTube. There was this dog that had gotten down in this drainage ditch. And this guy saw him, and he went down there, and then he got stuck too. But the cool thing about the video was all these other people came, and they made a chain, a human chain, where a guy was holding on to a fence, a guy was holding on to him, and then 2 or 3 others were holding on to each other so the guy could grab the dog and be pulled up. But it took time. Things had to get taken care of slowly. But they figured out a way to make it happen. And they did rescue the little dog. But the point is that it took more than one person. It took more strategy than just jumping in to do the right thing. And I think sometimes we can make things worse, even when we're helping other people with really good intentions. So it's smart that we're patient. We know God hears us, and now we're involved in the fact that He's lifted us. He will lift us. Right now, a lot of people feel down and out. You can get depressed. You can get disappointed with things in your life. And I think it's very natural for that to happen. And sometimes there's nothing like somebody just listening to you or somebody just encouraging you. And it helps lift you out of the little bit of darkness you're in. And God's always willing, if we cry out to Him, if we wait on Him, lift us out of the situation. But you know what? If we're so involved in our own turmoil and unrest, we may not even notice that He's ready to lift us out. You know, like the old joke about the guy in the flood. And he's standing alone on top of this little mountain, and there's this horrible flood going on. He says, God, help me. And all of a sudden, a guy comes by on a boat, and he says, hey, man, you need me? He goes, no, I'm waiting on God to help me. He said, okay. Off goes the boat. Then the helicopter comes by. They drop a rope. He goes, no, thanks. I'm waiting on God. And then the water rises up so quick, the guy gets swept in it, and he's gone. He ends up in heaven, and he says, God, why didn't you help me? And God said, well, I sent a boat. I sent a helicopter. Sometimes we're so, like this is the only way my problem's going to get fixed, is it's going to look like the way I want it to look. Then when it doesn't happen, it's because it's not that it wasn't able to happen. It's because we didn't even recognize it would happen, because we were so determined to make it happen our way. God will lift us up. Don't be surprised by His many creative ways of helping us, just like the stars He created and all that. There's not just one set way for God to do something. I've known people who've prayed, and they saw somebody, a loved one, healed. And they thought, that's the ticket. That's how you have to do this every time. And so the next time somebody gets ill, they're just going to show so much faith. They're going to do it exactly. And this time, God doesn't deal with it. The person, it was their time to go. And people are like, well, I can't be mad at God. I resent Him a little bit, but I'm going to try even harder this time. Listen, God's got a billion ways to answer our problems and deal with our issues. We need to be patient. Let Him lift us up, and let's do it His way. Instead of thinking, I finally figured it out. Do you know how many self-help books are out there? You know how many self-help Christian books are out there? I'm not against them. I say keep writing them, because they're going to encourage people. But there's not just one fixed pattern. There's not just a list of rules you can plug into the machine of God and He's going to kick out an answer. We're too short-sighted sometimes, a little bit too willing to discredit how creative our God is and what He can do to help us, and at the same time glorify Himself. So He can lift you out of anything, the muck, the mire, anything, and you have to be prepared to recognize it when it does. Then it says, so far, follow me, it says wait patiently. That's our job. But His job is He turned, He heard, He lifted, and now right underneath that it says He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. Okay, so He's going to lift you and not just sort of get you out of the situation, the addiction, the problem. How many people, get out of an addiction issue and end up going right back into the slavery of it because they don't realize the next thing God's going to do is set them in a different place. A lot of folks, we just have to change our lifestyles. We have to change our patterns. We get caught into something, and then when we get out of it, we end up right back in it because we didn't accept the fact, even though He was able to lift us up, He's also got the plan of setting something new in our life. He's setting us on a solid rock. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire, and set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. He's going to lift you, He's going to set you, and He's going to give you. There's a plan to following God. It's not always the same thing every time, but it's a new way of thinking. It says in Romans 9, He renews my mind. You have to let Him renew the ways of your life. If you've been doing one thing over and over and over, and you're expecting God to just instantly make this big adjustment, which He does occasionally, well, you're sort of anticipating not having to put some effort into this thing. I think sometimes people misinterpret grace as effortless Christianity. God saved me. He rescued you. Through grace, He's rescued. He's pulled us out of our situation. Maybe eternally changed our lives. But okay, so now I don't have to do anything. No, you're still involved. If He's gifted you, for example, of an athlete or a very sharp-minded person, or maybe whatever talents you have, it's natural to realize you got to put a little effort into what you have. I mean, Michael Jordan just didn't become Michael Jordan. He worked at being Michael Jordan. He worked hard at it. And then other people say, well, I've got a little bit of talent and I've worked so hard at it, but I didn't become Michael Jordan. Well, no, you can only take what you've got and double it. Everybody's only got so much, but the effort is to double it. Double what you have. What little talent you have, double it and you'll have more. But you have to put some effort into it. It requires a little energy on the part of us believers. I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to pray about it. Oh, I'm just not going to think about it. Hey, guys, there's effort involved into living. And the more effort you put into something, the more reward you gain. So God's going to give you that firm rock. But if you're going to stand on it, you're going to have to make yourself stand on it. And what is the rock? Well, of course, symbolically, it could be Jesus. We know time and time again in Psalms, He's our rock, He's our fortress, He's the cornerstone. Okay, we get all that. It's like last week, I believe it was last week, or maybe one of my little grace chats during the week, I talked about how Jesus told the story of the man who built his everything he had on sand. So when the rain and the storms came, the sand broke apart. It couldn't hold the structure. But the man who built his house on a rock, who strategized and planned and made the effort to really rely on something strong, well, of course his house withstood the storms. That's us. What are you building on? What are you building on? Once you realize you're building it on God, hang in there. Get smart. Be strong. And build your house on something that's steady and stable and won't disappoint you or fall apart underneath you when life starts to get tough and hard. You got to count on God. I remember my car accident several years ago. I remember I couldn't do anything. I was in a hospital, messed up, and I couldn't walk, feel my legs, or none of this stuff. And I remember thinking, okay, what's going to happen now? But I was secure enough in my relationship with God that regardless of what was going to happen, and thank God it all turned out well, regardless, I was willing to go, I just trust God. I know that He's got me. No matter what, He's got me. I can rely on Him. I feel stable with Him. Of course, He had blessed me with a beautiful family and a great wife who was my advocate in the hospital. And my kids all were around and flew in and got to stick with me here and there and stay with me. But I knew spiritually I wasn't alone. My house was built on something stable, and it was my reliance of Jesus Christ. Then listen to this. Not only did He set my feet, or your feet, or our feet on that rock, He gives us a firm place to stand. He's giving it to us. He's going to help us. He's going to help you. He's going to give you the ability to stand on what's necessary. Then in verse 3 it says, He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to God. He's going to not only change your life, He's going to give you a new song to sing, a new attitude, a new way of looking at the life. It's no longer dark and cloudy. I remember when I was a little kid, I couldn't see good. I was Zirkle, and I was in the back of the school class, and they had the little alphabet thing, like a little train with A, B, C, D. I couldn't read it. I didn't know I couldn't see until my mom and dad took me and get my eyes checked. All of a sudden, we were driving home, and I had on my new glasses, and I thought, hey, those are trees. I can see the sun coming through them. I didn't see the little leaves. I just saw this blotch of green, and I still do unless I have my glasses on. Can't drive without glasses. But the thing is, I saw the world differently. So new, so fresh. And that's what God does. He puts new eyes in you. He gives you new ears to hear. He gives you a new song to sing. So notice this. He turns, He hears, He lifts, He gives, He puts. puts new attitude into you. And then listen to this. Many will see and fear the Lord and put their trust in him. Because of what God does in your life, other people will, it's not fear like, oh, I'm scared of God. It's fear like, oh, I respect what God's doing in this person's life. I can see that God is doing something new. And it helps people see your life, your story, God changing you and helping you in maybe big dramatic things or just little everyday things. Other people are seeing it. They're witnessing it. And it's helping them trust God like you're trusting God. But to trust God, you've got to rely on him. You've got to depend on him. You've got to speak to him. And then give him the chance to be who he is in your life. Not only will it bless you and encourage you and strengthen you, it'll bless people around you, because they're going to want to ignore what God can do in a person's life. And then, of course, it glorifies God. And that's the most important thing. Because when God's glory reigns, things just work for people. Things just turn glorious in you as well as the heavens, because God's winning. Let's give him a chance to do that. Let's stop thinking about just meeting our needs our way, controlling and fixing problems, with our best efforts. Let's put the effort in to trust God, and then put the effort in to do it God's way. And let's see what happens in our lives. Anyway, that's enough for this morning. I do want to remind you guys that it helps when you give. Our little church, we haven't been able to meet for a couple months. We still need I'm just talking to our guys, we need the tithes and offerings. There's a new way to do it. You can do it via the internet and all that stuff, but you have to get on our Mission of Grace website. Just type in Mission of Grace Hayden, and it'll take you, show you different ways you can give, our address or whatever. And of course, we always appreciate it. We got to keep things running. So if you haven't done that in a while, just try to get back into it if you feel so led by God. Remember, be a cheerful giver. And there's a lot of people, they need a lot of help in giving right now, so make sure you do that as well. Anyway, God bless you. Have a great week. I will talk to you Wednesday. That's my next little chat time. God bless you guys.